Welcome to the first tutorial about how to use Mockifer, which is an open source library for building an embedded web server that can be used in iOS, Android, desktop, and probably a few other targets as well. This is the first tutorial, and I'll run through a few things that you need to have set up on your developer machine to be able to use this. I kind of assume that you've already downloaded the Mockifer repository from GitHub. You can see on the left hand side of my screen there, that's the files that you would see. A lot of the commands are actually driven through Gradle, so we use terminal for a few of them. But before we get to that, because Mockifer is primarily targeted to mobile platforms, you will need to be on a Mac, and you will need to have Xcode installed, as well as Android Studio. So you can find how to get those things from the internet. I'm hoping that if you're doing these tutorials you kind of already do mobile development, otherwise you might find it a bit difficult to follow along. As well as installing both of those tools, there's a couple of other tasks that have to happen so the environment's ready to be used. The first is we'll need to have access to Xcode build on the command line. So to make sure you have the Xcode command line tools installed, you can say Xcode select -- install. If you run that from your terminal, it should download and install all the Xcode tools that allow you to run things on the command line. I won't do it here because I've already got this machine set up. And there's probably not a lot else you need to do for Xcode. But for Android, once you've got Android Studio installed, a couple of things you'll need to do. Go down to Configure, go to the SDK Manager, and down to the Android SDK. So currently, this version of Mockifer, the Android library itself, compiles against SDK 25. You can actually change that if you want to, but at least for the source code as it is out of the repository, you'll grab this SDK. And then probably more importantly, over in the SDK tools section, you'll definitely need to install CMake and the NDK, because the Android library compiles C++ code to generate the Android framework. As well as that, you will also need to have installed the Kotlin plugin. At the time that Mockifer was developed, I was using Android Studio 2.3, and the Kotlin plugin was something you had to install yourself. And you see here, this is the plugin here. I've already got it installed, but you would just install that. When Android Studio 3 is released, I believe you won't need to do this step. It will be baked in. So you do need to install the Kotlin plugin as well. So once you've got the Kotlin plugin installed and the Android SDKs, including NDK and CMake installed, you should be fairly right to go. So the next thing to have a quick look at is the folder structure in Mockifer itself. So over on the left, we have two main categories, which is a products folder and a source folder. And the products folder is a place where, after compiling each of the targets, this is where the output ends up. So for example, in here, the Android folder, you can see that it contains a .aar, which is the library you would embed in the application, as well as this folder, which contains the generated content, including the JavaScript application. So everything in the products folder is actually generated, so don't edit anything in here because it regenerates every time a compile happens. Similarly, if we have a look at the iOS folder, the iOS target generates a framework which you can bring into Xcode, and this here is exactly the same content that I just showed you in Android. And there's a couple other targets that are part of Mockifer. You can build a console application which produces a terminal application, and again, the same copy of the content, and the editor, which we'll get into in just a minute. So this project uses Gradle for most of its tasks, and what you can do is run Gradle w tasks to get a list of all the tasks that are available. I'll just do that now, and what you'll see is there's a section called Mockifer tasks, and these are kind of the main important ones. We've got build Android, which builds that Android product. Build console builds the console product. Build editor builds the editor product, which I will show you in a minute. Build iOS builds the iOS framework. Build JavaScript engine is usually used internally. You don't necessarily need to call this yourself, but it compiles the Kotlin JavaScript code and updates all the product folders with the output. This is a convenience task which just simply builds iOS and Android. This is another convenience task which just cleans all the products if you need to. And this one here actually boots up the editor. So what we might do is actually run the Mockifer editor, which is where a lot of the content gets edited, including all the routes that get defined for determining which route to choose to handle a request. So we could run this Gradle task directly, but there's just a couple of convenience shell scripts in the root folder as well, and so we can just do this one here, run editor. So I'll do that now. Run editor, and what it's actually doing is run that Gradle task, and then there's this desktop application, and this is called the Mockifer editor. And this on the left here is a list of all the routes that are known to Mockifer, and you can click through them and see all the details on the right hand side. So for example, this one here, get all cats, it's a GET request when you call on this URI, and in this particular case it calls an internal handler which is written in JavaScript, although we don't have to, but that we covered in another tutorial. And the interesting thing is this editor is actually running an instance of Mockifer itself. That's how it works. So to edit the content, you're actually running the product. And to prove this, we can open up Chrome and see here that it's hosting on localhost 8501. So if I just do a refresh there, you can see that the responses come back from this editor itself. A browser is an okay way to test this stuff, but a better way to do this is actually to use a program called Postman, which is normally used, well, often used by many people to test APIs. And in fact, you see here on the left here, I've got a bunch of predefined templates for Postman. I'll actually just remove them and I'll show you how you can add your own. I'll just delete those. And if you choose to import and choose files, browse to where your Mockifer install is, into the support folder, and there's a JSON file there called Mockifer Postman Collection. Open that. You can see here that's all the same things I had on the left. So if I run that, I'm actually talking to the editor directly. So I can call the APIs through here. So this is a good way to test this while it's running. And of course, once I close this editor, Mockifer is shut down. So if I were to call this method again, I can't connect because now it's no longer running. So if you reach this point, it means everything's able to compile and run, and it's a good point to stop this tutorial. And in the next tutorial, I'll show how to open the sample projects, which give you a bit of a hint of how to integrate Mockifer itself, and walk you through a couple of things in there. Okay, thank you.